Hello, my name is Nils Lukas and I'm going to present the paper Differentially Private Two-Party Set Operations, which is a joint work by many students at the University of Waterloo. So we're specifically going to look at computing predicates or functions on top of the result of a private set intersection. So this could be interesting. For example, when two network centers want to find out common cyber threat indicators, then they could employ differential privacy as a predicate to trade off privacy and utility, which in this case are false positives and false negatives, on top of the intersected elements. Another use case would be private set intersection cardinality for a genome database. So here assume that a researcher wants to determine the impact that a predominant allele has on for a subset of patients that have a specific trait. The client or the researcher would query the set intersection cardinality of their set with a remote set, with all elements in the remote set, and their set and all elements in the remote set that have this specific allele, and from the quotient they could identify the impact that this specific allele has for the trait. And differential privacy would also be interesting to apply on the set intersection to protect against malicious clients that want to find out more about individual records. So to summarize, classical PSI only protects elements that are outside of the set intersection. And also they make no assumptions about the set sizes of the client and the server. Our work protects also elements that are inside of the set intersection through differential privacy, and we make assumptions on the client and the server set sizes. We assume that the client has fewer elements than the server. What is cool about our work is that we can compute arbitrary predicates on the set intersection while remaining or while upholding the differential privacy guarantees. So our contributions are that we are the first to develop a practical protocol that can evaluate arbitrary predicates or arbitrary functions on top of the set intersection results, even when we have millions of server elements. Our communication costs compared to related work is significantly decreased from 2.5 gigabytes to 230 megabytes for 1 million server elements. In our paper, we detail provably optimal communication and computation complexity and optimal accuracy for given privacy parameters. Also, we made our code public, and I will give a link at the end of the presentation. So to the technical side, how does this work? So we combine two technologies. First, leveled homomorphic encryption, which allows us to evaluate bounded numbers of additions and multiplications on ciphertexts, and differential privacy, which allows us to trade off privacy and utility by bounding the influence that individual records have on the response of a query. And we can all compute this securely, meaning that the differential privacy, applying differential privacy, we do not need to know about the plain texts that we apply the differential privacy on. So from a bird's eye view, our protocol is very simple. It's a one-round protocol where the client encrypts all their elements, sends them over to the server. The server then computes the predicate, and for example, the private set intersection or the private set intersection cardinality, that is both times differentially private, and then sends over the results back to the client who can decrypt them. So at no point in time does the server learn anything about the client elements. He only sees the ciphertexts. So zooming in a little bit more into the technical side, the client first uses cuckoo hashing on all their elements to hash these elements into bins. Then we use vectorization from homomorphic encryption to encode elements across the bins into a plain text. Then what we do is we encode this plain text into a binary notation, because that makes it significantly easier to compute whether two elements are identical or not, which we need for computing the set intersection. and then we encrypt the ciphertext and send it over to the server. Now the server receives the encrypted batches, and they want to align or compare each element in each batch with all server elements that are hashed to the same bin. Now the server wants to apply differential privacy, so he wants to reply non-truthfully for a subset of these elements, and we apply a randomized process by using a biased coin toss, which twice. So we toss a coin twice, and the first coin toss determines if we respond faithfully or not, and the second coin toss, which only happens if we do not reply faithfully, determines how we reply, either with a match or no match. Now the server replaces all the elements in which we reply non-faithfully with predetermined non-matches that always will turn out to be non-matches. Then the matching phase happens, which, as I said, is binary encoded, so it's very simple. It's just an XOR and a negation, and a large AND gate. And then we obtain, for each batch that we compare the client batch to, we obtain a matching vector that has a 1 at the kth element if the kth client element of that batch matched to any of the server elements. Now all these matching vectors we can just sum and obtain a final matching vector that is aligned with the client elements. That matching vector we can now use for both DIPSI and DIPSI-CA, so DIPSI cardinality. I will first focus on DIPSI, so just the set intersection. Here we have a matching vector, and everywhere we first, like that is denoted by the flags, we had a 1 coming up as the coin cost, meaning that we answer non-truthfully. We throw a second coin, and the second coin determines how non-truthfully we respond. And since we forced a non-match in the very beginning, we can now just add a 1, that is the result of the coin toss, if we want to force a match, and add a 0 if we do not want to force a match. And that is then sent back to the client, who can see which elements matched or presumably matched and which didn't. For DIPSI-CA, the set cardinality, the process that we use for the differential privacy is slightly different because we use Laplacian noise. So here the client would decrypt the ciphertext, and in order to get the cardinality, just sum all the ones in the batch. The server wants to only respond with cardinality and not leak which elements matched. So they add noise that sums to 0 in the plaintext modulus for each slot, and then they add Laplacian noise to the last slot, which then protects the result at the client with differential privacy. And the great thing is that we can apply this differential privacy without even decrypting at the server side, and still we can provably obtain theoretical privacy guarantees. So for the experimental results, we compare with CLR and PSWW. On the top you see computation, on the bottom communication, and from the computation charts you see that we're not really competitive. This has some reasons. So first, CLR does not support differential privacy, and second, in the communication you see the numbers that I mentioned in the very beginning, that PSWW has very high communication costs, 2.5 gigabyte rather than 230 megabytes, making our scheme more practical for many applications. Also, our high runtimes come from high constants in the homomorphic encryption. Thank you for your attention. I hope this interested you. If you have questions, write me an email, and please make sure to check out the code and the paper.